Today's new budget forecast for the next 2 years is very good news for Minnesota. The projected deficit has been lowered by $463 million. That's a 42% reduction from what was predicted just 3 months ago. By comparison, the $627 million deficit now projected for the next biennium is about 1/10 of the $6.1 billion deficit projected for the next biennium when I took office in January 2011. That's progress. Next month, we will pay another $290 million owed to our school districts from previous borrowing. We have now repaid almost $2 billion of that debt in the last year. That's progress. While the nation's economic recovery is slower than anyone would like, Minnesota is outperforming most other states and the national average. In 2012, our percent job growth was the 12th best of the 50 states. This forecast projects that we will return to our pre-recession, all-time highest level of employment in the state by the end of this year, about 9 months sooner than the nation as a whole. That's progress. It's not progress anybody's satisfied with, but it's a big step forward from where we were 2 years and 2 months ago. And this forecast also recognizes, for the first time, a mere $91 million in savings from the health care contract reform, and mere in the sense that we believe it's much higher than that, but the forecasters are lagging behind in terms of attributing money, and so I expect that number will grow with subsequent forecasts. I've not yet formulated my proposal for the use of the $463 million improvement in the forecast for the next biennium. I'm told it will take MMB a few days to possibly make very, very minor adjustments in today's numbers. And it'll take the Department of Revenue a week to recalibrate my tax proposals. So I'm planning to release my revised budget proposal during the week of March 11th. I expect to propose that most of the money be returned to Minnesota taxpayers in additional tax reductions. An upfront exemption from sales taxes on capital investments by businesses will encourage new construction projects and other business investments, which will continue our job growth. I also want to increase the renter's tax credit to treat Minnesota's renters fairly with homeowners, to whom I'm proposing to provide a $500 property tax rebate. But again, I want to see the final projections by revenue and MMB before I make my final decisions. The one bad spot in today's forecast was that proceeds from the new ETABS gaming continue to fall below projections. I want to emphasize, and I trust Commissioner Showalter did, that there is no financial problem at the present time. No bonds have yet been sold to finance the new stadium, and none will be until August. MMB can control the timing of that and future bond sales to help manage this situation. And the gap in revenues from the originally expected to the now projected is $13 million for the next 2 years. So it's not an insurmountable problem, but it is a problem. We will be working with legislative leaders to solve it, and we will solve it. Be glad to respond to questions.
Governor, you said that you plan to prorate sort of this improvement in the forecast into tax reductions in your budget. At this point, as you stand here today, are you more inclined to make downward adjustments in all the components or some components of your proposal, or to drop an element of it entirely?
You know, I don't know. I think it said most of it would go to tax reduction, but I just mentioned two in particular that are not included presently: the renter's credit and the exemption on the sales tax. So, you know, so that's not pro rata approach, and I don't know what I'll do with the rest. I have to.
How about sales tax? You had mentioned when you rolled out your budget that wasn't exactly your favorite part of your budget plan. Does this give you some leeway to back off on some of the sales?
Again, I really need to wait. And, I mean, I was surprised this morning. I think most people were at this forecast. I was kind of speculating in my own mind. What would I do if it's $100 million for the good, and what do I do $100 million or so for the bad? So I don't have a ready answers. And again, because MMB and revenue, last time we had a $6.1 billion deficit drop down to $5 billion. And it was such a, we didn't have to wait for the calibrations because, the change was so huge. But this time the calibrations, and especially given that I've made a number of new tax proposals, really do matter and could add up. So I'm just going to wait.
Governor, does this at least reduce the pressure to increase taxes?
Well, I believe we have made progress in this state because we've made investments in things like education. And I know that from the facts that those investments have been declining over the last 10, sometimes 20, 30 years. In real after-inflation dollars, the state contributes less now to higher education, the University of Minnesota, MnSCU, and student aid, than at any time since 1981. We ranked in 1996, which if you take the price of government statistics that the Minnesota Chamber and others championed back in the 90s, 1996 was the high point of the price of government in Minnesota, and we ranked 5th among the states in spending for K-12 education. This last count, we ranked 33rd. So, we can, say, well, we're not going to invest anything more in education. We're not going to, do early childhood. We're not going to do all-day kindergarten. We're going to just, be on this glide path of less commitment and expect better results. I don't think that's realistic. So I think Minnesota
reduce the pressure a little bit, at least for some of the tax increases.
There's $463 million that is available today that wasn't available yesterday, so that does ease pressure, sure.
Governor, how much of the $463 million would be taken up if you went forward with the exemption and the renter's tax credit?
The exemption is about $125 million. The renter's credit is based on a percent. Commissioner Scholler, he only deals with the spending side, We'll take it out of the reserves if we need to, No. Inside joke. Inside joke.
Governor, Republicans are already calling this a vindication of their no new tax approach to the budget and say that your taxes would kind of steer Minnesota off this recovery path. Your reaction?
Well, first, I think it's kind of humorous because all last fall the Republicans were attacking the bad Obama economy, and now they're trying to take credit for it. I don't, they view everything through a narrow, extreme prism of no taxes is the greatest public virtue. And I think Minnesotans rejected that extreme approach. I think Minnesotans said last November we want to take a balanced approach. We've cut spending. 2011 legislature and I give credit to the Republican legislative leaders. We cut $2 billion from spending for this current biennium. And almost all of that carries forward into the next biennium, which means that it's about $2.5 billion of less spending. And that's why, as I say, if you track anything that we've been doing relative to other states or in real dollars, you'll find that, except for health care, where we are increasing, as just about every other state, we have been going downward. If you look at in here, the employment by sector for Minnesota, somewhere on one of my yellow tabs, you'll see that the one area where we had a decrease in employment last year was in government, down 0.1%. So, we rank in the last statistics 15th highest in overall taxes per $1,000 of personal income, and we rank 25th in expenditures. And those are both down considerably from a decade or so before. So I think people don't understand the context, and that's my job. That's my job. That's our elected representatives' job, is to understand the consequences of failing to make these kind of investments in education. And that's where most of my additional, spending is proposed to go. Most of it goes to K-12 and higher education, and then the healthcare costs continue to rise, and that's basically it.
Governor, on the sales tax, do you think you could rework the sales tax and reduce it and broaden the base without taxing the business services, which appears to be like the most controversial part of that proposal?
I'm not going to get into speculating now. I don't have the information with which to respond. But we'll look at what's possible given what's changed today.
Governor, you did speculate. You speculated that you would do more on the tax expenditure side. I don't think I've heard you say that you're open to reducing the tax increases you proposed. Are you open to reducing those?
Well, I mean, what do you mean by open to it? I'm open to anything right now because I haven't considered anything except for these two, which were part of the last line we had to draw before I submitted my original budget. So those two are sort of right, in the queue. I don't know what my other, options are going to be, and I don't, have to assess and talk with others and see what we think will be most effective to continue the positive track that we're on.
Governor, Commissioner Showalter said that the critics on the Viking Stadium funding were right. You need to backfill about 50%. What's your idea for that?
Well, this is a brand new enterprise, and obviously the initial projections were considerably wrong. I think everybody made their best attempt to do it and get it right, and now we got to figure out how to correct that so we can make up that difference. So there are fallback. And I don't want to get into we're not at that point yet, but there are fallback revenue sources for the stadium. There's tax surcharge on the suites and another lottery game. So and we'll work with legislative leaders, hopefully on a bipartisan basis, and see what makes sense to do.
Governor, do you need to reopen the Vikings bill and come up with a plan B?
Not as far as I'm concerned. And even if we have to adjust the financing mechanism of it, I don't think that requires reopening the bill. I mean, the people can reopen the bill here, any bill that they want, anytime they want. I mean, so, I can't preclude that, but I don't see the need for...
Do you still have confidence in the ETAB revenues coming in as predicted?
I think their ETAB revenue will improve. I think, we're lagging way behind in terms of what the projection was for the number of establishments that are offering it, and there's some factors in that. The amount of time it's taking to do background checks and approve the applications. We're going to work on speeding that up. Some other issues with the manufacturers of them and the distributors, and things that I don't understand. So we're going to work on that, and we're going to focus on it and push it hard, and then see where we get in the year's time in terms of not just see where we get, but I think in a year's time we'll see significant improvement, and I think we'll be much closer to the projection. Whether we'll hit the projection at that point, all remains to be seen.
Would you be open to opening of the stadium? They'd have to be pushed back. No. Would you be open to Racino or casino proposals that seem to be bubbling up again?
Not at this time, no.
Governor, you weren't real keen on the cigarette tax increase to begin with. Would that be one of the increases that could be kind of pushed to the edge of the table with the news today?
I guess, again, anything is possible. I mean, that one, as I said before, I've always opposed because it is regressive. I mean, this Department of Revenue's suits index they use to evaluate my proposal, the cigarette tax is like 5, -5 is by far the worst. So, proves the point. It's a regressive tax, but the purpose of it is to get people young people not to smoke, anybody not to smoke, and to encourage people to get off. So it has a cross purpose with the regressivity, but I don't, we picked a level that was equal to Wisconsin's. I mean, obviously, that doesn't affect the borders, the west and south of us, but the legislature obviously has a prerogative to look at it differently.
Governor, what role does the federal sequestration play in budget discussions going forward?
Dr. Stinson had pretty much the same estimate that we got out of the administration on Monday when the governors met with the president, the vice president, some of their top economic people, which is that it's not going to trigger a recession. If it continues, it'll possibly lop about 0.5% off of the GDP growth in the country. So it's a serious consequence, but it'll be gradual, and it will probably, have more effect in the out years than it will in this calendar year.
You indirectly referenced Governor Walker in your State of the State address. Does this give you more sparring points with him?
We get along very well, We sat next to each other at dinner, and, we get along very well.
One more question.
Governor, bonding bill still planned for this year?
Yes. Now we turn our attention to the bonding bill, and again, I would hope to have that week of the 11th as well. I'm not going to promise it, but that would be my goal.
$500 million ballpark, or is this giving you
we have to see what this forecast does, and that would be, one option would be to increase the debt service. We rank 35th among the states in debt service per $1,000 of personal income. So, and we should be responsible. We want to be low, but we'll look at it. We got so many projects that are just so really important. This building here is very, going to be a significant part, and other things that have been postponed, the downtown improvement projects in Rochester, Mankato, and St. Cloud that I still believe are essential to the long-term vitality of those areas. And I don't know what's going to happen with Mayo, what course that's going to take, but that's another project. So, there's a lot that we need to do. And again, that's the role of government, is to make those investments, make those capital investments that are going to pay off in the future. We're not talking about, in the business community, to the credit, supports early childhood education. That's not because they're going to increase their profits or sales next year. It's for the next 20 years and 30 years. We need to take care of Minnesota now and improve the standard of living of our people and jobs. But we also need to be taking care of Minnesota 20 or 30 years from now. Because if we don't do it by then, it's too late. And our kids and grandkids inherit the problems that we didn't help correct. Okay, thanks.